In the last two videos, we looked at the crisis in Mary Stuart's life, specifically the rebellion that involved the murder of her trusted secretary David Riccio and the attempt to detain her. And at the center of it all was none other than her husband, Lord Darnley. He played a key role in starting the whole rebellion, but oddly enough, he also played a crucial part in putting it down. And their child, Prince James, was born shortly after Mary successfully defeated the rebellion. After the rebellion was crushed, Darnley got cocky. He claimed all the credit, of course, but no one was fooled. Everyone knew that he had also helped the nobles to start the rebellion to begin with. In a situation like that, the smart move would have been to lay low and keep quiet, but Darnley didn't get the memo. Then, things went downhill fast. Mary began distancing herself from Darnley again. Actually, distancing is putting it mildly. If it were up to her, she would have had him executed for treason right then and there. But she couldn't. Why? Because of their son James. It's not simply because Darnley was the crown prince's father. Executing the father of the future king was a risky thing to do, but not unthinkable if he really is a traitor, and Darnley definitely was. But the problem was the rumor that had been circling around, that James wasn't Darnley's son at all, but the child of Mary's secretary David Riccio, whom Darnley helped to murder. If Mary executed Darnley, people would think that Mary actually had an affair with Riccio, and that James is Riccio's son. So Mary couldn't kill him, or even divorce him. Pushing for divorce would have labeled James a bastard. So she couldn't do anything, and for Mary, this whole situation was maddening and frustrating. Under that immense stress, and with no solution in sight, Mary began to show signs of serious depression. She tried everything to fix the problem. First, she attempted the gentle approach. Look, she might have told him, lots of kings and queens live separate lives. Let's just keep up the appearance in public. I won't interfere in your love life. Go meet whoever you want. I'll even introduce you to someone pretty. Just leave me alone. Now, Darnley wasn't exactly known for his good behavior. Back in England, he'd been chasing women left and right. But suddenly he became a one-woman man. He claimed Mary was his one and only, and swore never to be with another woman for the rest of his life. He kept showing up at her door, begging to be let in, even after being kicked out again and again. That's not love. That's a tantrum bordering on stalking. As Mary's rejection of him continued, Darnley also started to become more and more twisted. Sure, he was arrogant, but he also felt deeply humiliated by Mary and by everyone at court. Of course, it was all his own doing, but even a fool can lash out when pushed too far. So what did he do? He wanted to get back at Mary and hatched a cunning plan. He threatened to flee to France and to seek asylum at the French court. He went to Glasgow, got a boat ready, and made a big show of preparing to leave. When Mary heard this news, she was horrified. France was her home at one point. Everyone there knew her. And what would happen if this pathetic and uncontrollable man went over there and started to say things about her to people at French court? She would become a laughingstock. And worst of all, Catherine de Medicis would hear about it. Mary couldn't stand the thought. Just as she was trying to contain the situation, Darnley suddenly showed up in Edinburgh. He had made a big fuss like he was going to do something dramatic, but he didn't actually have the courage to go through with it. Still, that was not the end of it. France heard of this whole commotion about Darnley trying to seek asylum in France. And he was still the King of Scotland after all. It is a big deal if the King of Scotland is really thinking of seeking asylum in France. So France sent over an ambassador to investigate. Naturally, the ambassador wanted to hear Darnley's side of story. Now Mary had to contain the situation. So she brought Darnley to her bedroom for a little nocturnal emotional therapy, if you will. And it worked. Darnley was back to his old charming self, and when the French ambassador tried to get information out of Darnley the next day, he claimed that there were no issues between him and the Queen, and the talk of him going to France must be just a false rumor spread by someone. The ambassador was not convinced, but there was nothing he could do. And this time, it seemed Darnley's little act actually worked its trick. He flustered Mary, and she had to take him back, willingly or otherwise, at least for the moment. But in the end, this whole incident just made Mary more furious at him. As soon as the ambassador left, she kicked Darnley out again. Darnley became bitter and even more twisted. A short while later, Prince James's christening was held. Darnley, being the father, should have been there, and he was in the palace. But he became upset at the fact that he was not consulted on who would be the prince's godmother. And when he found out it would be none other than Queen Elizabeth, he exploded in anger. Elizabeth never consented to his marriage to Mary, and even tried to stir up a rebellion. He saw the choice of Elizabeth as a personal affront to himself, and he refused to attend the christening, a kind of let her see how it feels. A royal christening without the father? That was not a good look. Mary tried to talk him into it, but Darnley wouldn't hear of it. Not falling for that again, he might as well have said. And so, the ceremony went on while Darnley was sulking in his apartment. But for Mary, it was a painful humiliation. And it was not just Mary. By this point, the Queen's ridiculous husband was causing problems left and right, and everyone was exhausted. Darnley had become Scotland's biggest nuisance. Sure, reconciliation would have been ideal, but no one saw that happening. And that's when Mary's supporters began to think, maybe we need to rescue the Queen from this guy. Meanwhile, the political landscape of Scotland was changing again. The ever-calculating Moray was on his way to total control, with his allies securing the key positions in government one by one. What allowed Mary to stand firm against them was the presence of the Earl of Bothwell. Bothwell had served Mary's mother, Marie de Guise, from a young age with remarkable loyalty. Bothwell helped suppress the rebellion and earned Mary's full trust. He was now in complete control of the military. One of the big problems with Scottish nobles at the time was that they tend to get easily swayed or bribed by Queen Elizabeth of England. But not Bothwell. He ignored all bribes and temptations, including Elizabeth's. With such a man by her side, Mary was able to keep the rest of the nobles in check. But Bothwell and Moray were long-standing enemies. Moray had once driven him into exile. But now that they were both in positions of power, they had no choice but to work together, at least for now. Mary knew this and persuaded Bothwell to make peace. He reluctantly agreed, at least for now. With that, Moray and Bothwell began discussing pardons for the rebel nobles. And to everyone's surprise, Mary approved it. The same queen who never backed down against her enemies was now forgiving those who had risen against her. That raised some eyebrows, but behind this odd decision was, surprise, surprise, the problem with Darnley. Think about Darnley's relationship with the rebel nobles. Darnley betrayed Mary to side with the rebels, then turned around and betrayed the rebels when the tables were turned. It was because of him that many of the rebel nobles were forced into exile. And all three decision-makers, Mary, Moray, and Bothwell, wanted to suppress Darnley. Now, with their return, Darnley was surrounded by people who had every reason to want him gone. And he wasn't even in good health. He had contracted smallpox, or some say it was syphilis, or some say it was poison. Anyway, he was recuperating in his family estate in Glasgow. But for some reason, Darnley decided to travel to Edinburgh. But why? The man had been terrified for his life ever since the return of the rebel nobles, and he was still recovering from his illness. Why would he travel all that way back? Someone brought him back from Glasgow. And the only person who had that kind of hold over Darnley was Mary. In fact, She travelled to Glasgow herself in January of 1567 to visit him and asked him to come back to Edinburgh with her. Darnley was hesitant initially, fearing what the Protestant nobles would do to him. But this was Darnley, utterly enslaved to Mary, body and soul. He could not resist Mary's persuasion. But there was one catch. Mary told him that he could not stay in the palace of Holyrood House right away. Their infant son James was there, and Darnley was still sick. She cannot risk exposing the infant to infection. And this made perfect sense to Darnley. So he agreed to stay at a house near the palace. Near the Holyrood House Palace, there is a small village called Kirk-o-Field. Darnley stayed there in a small house. After he came to Kirk-o-Field, Mary visited him daily. She never did anything half-heartedly. Once she set her mind to it, she would dedicate herself to accomplish it, and in this case, she seemed like she decided to reconcile with her husband for the sake of their son. She was her usual charming and lively self, and it reminded him of their early days when he was suffering from measles and she was nursing him back to health. She brought back the warmth and sweetness of their honeymoon days. She even stayed in a downstairs bedroom because Darnley was so afraid that someone will try to kill him while she was away. Was this genuine? Or was she crossing over into the classic Black Widow territory? By February 9th, which was Sunday, Darnley was feeling much better and he was ready to move into the palace. They decided to move in the next morning. On that same day, Mary's favorite page was getting married, and Mary and her ladies went to the wedding banquet at noon. They came back from the wedding in the afternoon in good spirits. Mary was going to sleep in the downstairs bedroom again, but someone reminded her that she promised to attend the evening celebration for the wedding. Darnley was not happy about it, but Mary had already promised to attend. Darnley threw tantrum, but he finally calmed down only after Mary gave him one of her rings from her finger as a token of her affection. So with that, Mary went back to Holyrood House with her attendants. Darnley made a couple of arrangements for their departure to Holyrood the next morning, like ordering the horses to be ready early in the morning. But in the middle of all the excitement, there were a couple of other things happening. First, Mary's half-brother, the Earl of Moray, suddenly took a leave of absence that day, citing his wife's illness. Moray was a person who was always one step ahead, always slipping away from responsibility just in time, with plausible deniability. No one at the time questioned his disappearance. Second, some of Mary's favorite furniture were moved to the palace earlier that day. It could have easily waited until the next day. There was no real urgency. But then again, it could have been just an early arrangement, since they were leaving the next morning anyway, and the Queen will be staying at the palace after the late evening celebration. Darnley noticed none of it. He was simply in a good mood. That night, he went to bed alone, full of joy and hope. Around 2 a.m. that night, explosion ripped through the house. Being built-up timber, it caught fire instantly. When people rushed to the scene, they found Darnley's body in the garden. Who did this? At that time, nearly everyone in Scotland's ruling class thought Darnley needed to go. He made enemies everywhere. There were plenty of people who hated him. So really, it could have been anyone. But to actually have done it? There was one clear suspect in everyone's mind, the Earl of Bothwell. At that time, he was the most powerful man in Scotland. So why would he take the lead in killing Darnley? And more importantly, was Mary planning this all along and brought Darnley back to Edinburgh for that purpose? Or was she simply trying to make amends with her husband, and someone wanted to take the last chance to get rid of Darnley before he moves into the Holyrood House with Mary? We will look at the backstory of what happened in our next video.